Good afternoon. My name is Berak Hussain. I am the International Student Counsellor at Carleton University at the Health and Counseling Services. Welcome to our final workshop today for our Managing Stress series, where we are taking a look at how to manage stress for exams, as well as how to manage stress for the upcoming holidays. I do apologize ahead of time that I sound like a blowhorn today. I've got a bit of a congestion issue going on. However, the workshop must go on. So please bear with me as I sound like this as we do our last part of our series to help students and anybody really who could be struggling with stress during this time of year when it comes to academics or other areas of your life, especially heading into the holiday season. So let's get started. Just a quick reminder before we jump into it. Last week, we took a look at burnout and how it impacts us and the difference between burnout as well as stress. And it is also on the Carleton Wellness page where you can access that. And the week before, we took a look at how to manage our stress in general in terms of understanding what stress is, how it impacts us, and the steps in terms of taking care of our stress. So it is also on our Carleton Wellness page, and you have access to that. If you want to watch all three or whichever one's more relevant to you, please do go ahead. Love to hear your feedback as well. And today's session will be interactive, so please don't hesitate to ask questions or jump in as we get right into it. And as usual, we have our PowerPoint that I'm going to bring up on the screen here so that you can also see as we go along with it. All right. So today we're going to take a quick look at what stress is, looking at stress in terms of, just want to make sure it's on the screen. Excellent. All right. So yes, so we'll be taking a look at how stress is impacting us and looking at what it is. So a quick review of what stress is, managing stress for exams, and then we'll jump into managing stress for the holidays. So as we took a look before, we understood that stress is the body's physical response to a perceived demand or threat, which is why we jump into the flight or fight response. And what happens is that stress and anxiety, they both add a challenge and opportunity to get us motivated for preparing for something, right? Whether it is running away or it is taking a look at what we need to do in the moment. So it does serve its purpose to prepare us. So each individual, of course, has their own optimal level of stress. And if you remember from the first workshop we took a look at, it's looking at our stress print. So each of us individually have our own unique stress print, just as though we would have our own individual fingerprint. And so this is your body's way of telling you how you cope and deal with stress and signals, notifications, essentially for you to be aware of ahead of time so that when you get the signal that ABC is happening or the combination of how you cope and deal with stress, you know that you need to do something about it. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble. So, when you surpass that optimal level, it could have that negative impact, what that we want to try and avoid as much as possible, right? We don't want it to get to that point. So, some signs to understand that you have surpassed your optimal level could include insomnia or oversleeping, or it could be appetite changes, or it could be too little or too much, right? It could be either one. It could be a difference in our mood, right? It could be more withdrawal if you're more of, let's say, somebody who is more active, right? Or who's more engaged. So you notice that you're more withdrawal. Perhaps there's also low mood that could potentially mean depression. Headaches, more illnesses, increased colds, flu, muscle aching, things like that. Now I'm beginning to wonder if I have surpassed my optimal level, given that I caught this head cold. Or it could be stomach issues as well. That could include IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. Moving on and looking at something we took a look at in the first workshop with a little bit more detail is that looking at the signs and symptoms of our stress, identifying what our stress print is. So essentially, what you want to do is go through this list and tick off all of the things that happen to you when you start feeling stressed and what happens at that point. So it could be anything from physical signs, could be behavioral signs, could be emotional signs or mental signs. So anything like we said from our body physically responding. So it could be headaches, indigestion, nausea, sweating, fatigue, weight gain, loss, this kind of thing. Could be behavioral signs, increased use of substances, right? So or it could be aggression or nervousness, biting fingers, and so on and so forth. Could be mental signs as well, right? Difficulty concentrating. That's a big one I find, especially this time of year with students, right? Decreased memory and decisiveness, mind going blank, right? Confusion, loss of sense of humor. Emotional signs can range anything from anxiety, anger, irritability, impatience, short temper, frustration, and worry, and so on and so forth. So, what you want to do is go through this list and that see which ones correspond to how you respond to stress when you get stressed. So take a look at that. I'll give a minute or so for you to go through that. Just tick off all of the ones that you notice happen to you when you get stressed. I notice my appetite decreases. I notice I start to think a lot. Um, Sleep is impacted for me, I notice. How about you? And it's not going to be just me speaking. I'd love the interaction of anybody else as well who's watching. And you give us your feedback as well. All right. If those of you who'd like to participate and share, you can let me know. Obviously, if this was an in-person workshop, it'd be much easier to interact. For those of you who are watching, if you can just type out, what are some of the signs that you notice happens to you if you'd like to participate? If not, that's all right. We can move on to the next part in terms of understanding what are some of the additional stressors that we can encounter. So, for example, our perception of stress, right? So the way we view a situation could be around financial situations or relationships and frustrations, right? So the way that we view such a situation or an event contributes more to the generation of a stress response than the actual situation itself. And the way we think can greatly affect the chance that we will experience that stress. For example, negative thinking, overgeneralizing, pessimism, overanalyzing, rigid thinking. These are things that we spoke about in our first session. These are the types of stress response when it occurs mentally in thinking about a situation that potentially may not necessarily be as stressful, but then the way that we think can also contribute to that. And it could be in regards to frustration or disappointment, perception of the lack of time or resources to meet our demands, right? There could be new or multiple decisions to make, social pressures, family issues, relationships, academics, definitely exams and the holidays. These can all contribute definitely to our levels of stress. When we take a look at what managing stress means, it means that, and according to Dr. David Spiegel here, that living a stress-free life is not a reasonable goal. The goal is to deal with it actively and effectively, because there's no such thing as no stress. We're going to encounter good or bad stress no matter what. The goal here again is to focus on understanding how to actively and effectively cope and deal with it. Now, with that in mind, let's take a look at some techniques that we did look at in our first session, and we're going to briefly look over them now. And it's understanding basic self-care and lifestyle strategies, right? So eating healthy, good sleep hygiene, taking mini breaks, and exercise. So having a good balance of these, when you're hit with a difficult situation, you're more likely to handle that difficult situation. But if one of these things are off, then it becomes more challenging to deal with that situation. Then there's the interpersonal strategies, right? So in terms of having good positive relationships around us, getting rid of toxic relationships, right? Having a good social support, learning how to say no and setting boundaries, learning and using good communication skills. Emotional strategies could mean nurturing activities for yourself as well as for others, and back to yourself, because we tend to give to others and forgetting ourselves most of the time. So, learning how to express our feelings, laughing more often, fake it till you make it type of analogy here and strategy, as we've said before, is that when you smile or laugh, this sends the muscles that move in the smile movement send signal to the brain that you are happy, hence hormones related to happiness are released. And then you eventually start feeling it, right? It's amazing how the body and the brain work together in the nervous system to send signals back and forth. Relaxation techniques, if you go back to the first session, we've done a lot around that, so you can watch the meditations that we've done there. When we take a look at cognitive strategies, looking at challenging negativity, being able to recognize and replace self-defeating thoughts. And perspective, right? Changing a perspective, for example, reframing. So when there is a problem that comes your way, learning how to reframe it to an opportunity. And spiritual philosophical strategies could include anything from increasing prayer, faith, connecting to the spiritual, to God, or whatever your faith system is, and clarifying your values. It could be within yourself or speaking with others as well. If we go a little bit further here in terms of overall stress management, this is about managing our sleep properly, right? And I know during exam time is really hard, especially when you have lots of midterms and assignments leading up to it. Getting 6 to 8 hours a night is almost near impossible. But trying as much as possible to get that, because what happens in sleep, and we'll talk more about it a bit later, is that this is when the cells are generated and memory occurs. We want to eat regular healthy meals and stay hydrated, balance between studies, work, and recreation, and understand and accept personal strengths and weaknesses or limitations and work on strengthening them. Taking breaks during study periods is important, and using our support network around us. Of course, regular exercise, and I know during study time it can be really hard or when the weather's colder, but perhaps going out for a 10 minutes walk, layering up can go a long way in helping, and learning and practicing relaxation skills, whether it's breathing techniques or muscle tension relaxation. These have been proven to be quite effective. So let's now take a look at stress management for exams. All right. So this is the time of year where we have final midterms heading into exams and final assignments. What we also want to be doing is knowing when your final exams are, is begin studying now, meaning as you are wrapping up the review for what you are doing currently, is to take note of what you may need for the final exams. So begin your studying early. Clarify early areas that you need to study, especially the ones that you need to focus a little bit more on because you're not understanding the concepts or you're a little bit behind. Organizing a time plan, that's really useful as well. Looking at, all right, so I've got 3 4 weeks for exams from now. What do I need to do to divide up my week? What can I get done each week? And break it down per week and day, and so on and so forth. Perhaps organizing a study group, that could be something really helpful and useful. And looking at people who are just as serious as you are to study and practice as well. There's also looking at organizing study groups, right? These are quite effective as well when looking at um, like studying together can perhaps motivate each other. You can pick up things from each other that perhaps you're missing out on. Somebody can explain something a little bit differently. So that could be something that could be very useful as well. And looking at enhancing your memory, right? So that could mean revision of what you were studying or asking the professor, the TA, or other classmates. That can go a long way in helping you looking at how to manage that stress ahead of time. So let's take a look at now some brain foods that are really useful in terms of enhancing our memory and helping us during exam time. So, brain food for peak performance can be anything from making sure you're well hydrated, reducing caffeine, and trying herbal teas instead. Although people tend to say that's when they drink the most caffeine is during exams because it will keep you up, right? But it also could give you a little bit more stress and anxiety in the shakes, right? You want to refuel yourself regularly. So begin with breakfast. Have a good full breakfast that includes wholesome carbohydrates. So making sure you've got whole grains, making sure you're having fruits and vegetables and some protein in there. Get that all in there. It can really help you. So making sure throughout the day eating more fresh fruits and vegetables, and slowly release carbs, like we said, for energy. We want to also eat less fast food. And I know this is the go-to that students go to during exam time. We want to avoid that, right? The fatty, the salty, the sweet, because it makes you have that de-sludging feeling, which we want to avoid. Nuts are great for memory as well. All right. Why do little walnuts look like brains, right? So these are really great to help as well. So other nutritional tips also include making sure you reduce the processed sugar intake, right? So refined sugars, because this can cause sudden drops in blood pressure, right? You want to reduce sodium intake as well, because excessive sodium can increase blood pressure. And you want to include always, like we said, protein in our diet. So this is necessary for energy, cellular immunity, and hormone production. And we want to include vitamin C and B complex vitamins because from broccoli, tomatoes, citrus fruits, and potatoes. And also include calcium. So anything from milk products, tofu, zinc, seafood, potassium, which could have also bananas and dark green leafy vegetables. So these are great to have throughout the day as you are studying. Now, how do we restore our brain power? Through sleep, which is one of the few things that students are always missing out on, right? We want to learn your sleep wave, okay? You want to catch that. So you want to read until you fall asleep, not study until you fall asleep, right? And then just let your sleep take over. And here, you want to learn also from your own sleeping patterns. When is your optimal sleep? When are you most likely to fall asleep? Just before exams is not the best time to change these patterns, right? You want to work on it ahead of time. Establishing a routine of sleep times, right? And wake times. This is great in training your body and mind to expect sleep and wake at those times. That can go a long way in really helping manage the sleep and looking at learning what your patterns are. Of course, again, we want to aim from 7 to 8 hours a night. I know that's challenging during exam time. You want to make up for that time as well. So, setting the alarm, no matter what your mind is doing, make sure that you go to sleep so that you can wake up refreshed just before the alarm goes off. It sounds idealistic. However, the more we practice that and put it into routine, then we're more likely able to do that. I'm sorry, I thought I had pressed those. I thought it was on the screen. So this is basically what I was talking about here, and also the sleep in terms of catching our sleep wave, learning our patterns, and establishing a routine of sleep and wake times, and the how many hours. So exam strategies. Right before the exam, what should we be doing that could be helpful? Well, we want to be listening carefully to oral instructions, right? We want to also read the instructions very carefully, right? Don't just jump right away into the exam. You want to plan your time effectively. So, for example, allocating the time in proportion to the percentage of the assessment, right? So, 3 equal sections in 2 hours means 40 minutes per section. So, aim to complete the main part of each in about 30 minutes. And then you've got 5 to 10 minutes on each section to do the revision, or if you've missed or you haven't attempted. And then the last 5 to 10 minutes to check for mistakes or clarify answers and further information, right? You also want to choose in order in which you'll answer the questions, right? That can also help you number answers very carefully. And don't panic if you don't have an answer. Skip it, leave it, go to another question, and come back to it later if you need. Spend your time answering questions rather than worrying about what you've done or not done or what you know and don't know. Focus on what you do know. Continuing on rather with our strategies here is looking at essay type of questions, right? So write dot pointed plans, right? So you can write outlines. I found when I used to do those in exams, those are really useful, especially when I ran out of time and I'd write time, but then I'd have all my outline ready to go and then still get marks. Honestly, the TAs don't want to be reading all of those exams and essays, right? When you've got your points already out there, those are easier to go through. So if you run out of time, you can absolutely do that. And multiple choice questions, those are our favorites, right? So don't change your answers unless you are sure, right? That's always something we can have, second guessing ourselves and being uncertain in terms of what's going on and what's happening. So this can go a long way in terms of helping reducing that stress in terms of not second guessing yourself and going with the flow of things that you have in terms of your confidence with the questions. Moving on now, in terms of continued strategy. So leave time for that revision at the end. Try as much as possible and don't leave early. Right? A lot of people, they say, okay, I'm just, especially if you're panicking or you're upset that you've messed up something, you know, what have you ever learned that way anyways? We really haven't, right? However, if you are having an actual panic attack, and it can occur, where you're feeling faint or shortness of breath or dizzy, feeling like you're about to pass out, or flushes or chills and all of that, feel that perhaps you're going to lose control or overwhelming powerlessness, then right away ask for support or medical attention. But in all other cases, stay. Do the best that you can, because number one, you would have tackled your anxiety, right? That anxiety demon, you would have worked through it rather than let it win. And number two, who knows? You may have actually done better than you think, right? Give yourself a little bit more credit. And you can always apply for special consideration after the exam if something went wrong. Especially students at Carleton, you can go talk to your therapist or doctor and they can help you with that as well. You can get a form from the exam proctor if you do leave for a deferral. Make sure that you get that, then that can help you with the medical and get a medical note as well. Okay, so make sure, Carleton students, if you do leave the exam, to get that from the proctor. And also, don't have post-mortems, rather, right? Wait for the grading feedback. And if you get the test back, try to learn what mistakes you've made. Then you can go and appeal, talk to the TA, talk to the professor, and then deal with it then, rather than being upset about it while you're doing in the exam or while you just left, right? So you want to avoid that. And especially when you have another exam you need to study for, you need to put this on the side so that you can focus on the next exam happening. All right, so let's head on into the next part now in terms of looking at what your plan for mastering or doing your absolute best in the exams is. Learning how to identify your own exam stress print, just like we said for your own stress print, right? Learn what factors increase your stress level so that you can get a hold of them sooner rather than later, right? Looking at what can you change rather than focusing on the things you cannot change. And that can be really, really challenging. And what can you accept, right? So when we look at change and acceptance, that can lower our stress because we're coming to that place of, rather than overthinking and worrying ahead, we're accepting things ahead. And I always say that to students, rather than worry ahead and stress ahead, plan ahead. And this includes looking at things that you're not going to have time to study, or focusing just on the things that you can, right? Identify revision and stress management strategies that work best for you. What may work for whomever may not work for you here. So you want to make sure that you focus on what works best for you. Okay. And of course, mastery. And I don't like necessarily using the word mastering because there's no such thing as perfect, right? It's about doing your absolute best. And this comes through practice. This comes through preparation. And this comes through learning ahead of time what works best for you in order to manage that. So let's take a look here at our final tips for managing exam anxiety. So trying to stay on a regular schedule of reviewing, eating, sleeping, and relaxing, right? We really want to try and get that ahead of time rather than last minute, right? Try to start this pattern ahead of time, not and even weeks if possible for exams, rather than last minute crashing. That's just not going to work. Try to Don't try to study rather for 24 hours a day. That's not just going to work for your brain. You need that downtime. You need that time to let everything saturate in, so to speak. Let your brain soak it up, right? Don't force yourself to study beyond your normal limits. We all have those limits where we need to go take for a walk, rest, get some good solid food, or even watch something on Netflix for a little bit, right? And don't do long study periods. Focus on short, regular study periods that are more productive than the lengthy single ones, and managing your sleep, eating, and exercise to de stress. So, these are our basic anxiety exam tips that we want to kind of master ahead of time and prepare ahead of time so that we are not scrambling last minute in terms of trying to figure things out. Also, know ahead of time where your exams are, what time. Most of the exams right now are going to be online, anyways, because of the pandemic, but try to be aware of all of that and bring everything that you need into the exam to be ready for it. All right, let's jump into the next part of our segment today, which is taking a look at holiday stress, right? And the holidays can be a wonderful time of year as the the holiday season rolls in. It can be exciting, but sometimes it can be quite stressful as well. So we'll take a look at some strategies to get through without hopefully gaining too much weight or getting to fights with the family and spending too much money and going into debt, getting more anxious, more sad, more depressed or lonely, especially heading into the new year. All right, let's jump right into it, especially when it comes to food. And I'm reminding myself above everybody else because I'm quite a foodie and love and enjoy my food. And sometimes during the holidays, especially around the office area, you got all these goodies, right? Or people start baking stuff and bring them over. I know within my culture, whenever it's Ramadan or the end of that month and it's Eid, we've always got goodies all the way around. And we kind of enjoy, indulging a little bit. And it's all right once in a while, but we want to do what we say here in terms of mindful eating, right? To combat putting on the pounds. So, a few ideas here is that you know, when you are hungry, stop when you start to feel full, right? And also being aware that the average person's caloric intake increases from 2000 to 36 100 rather, not 1000. So 2000 to 3600 a day, normally to about 45 to 6000 during the holiday season. That's quite a jump. So we want to be eating foods that give you energy, right? And eating on smaller plates, and don't neglect exercise and movement, right? And of course sleep, because that has a huge impact on weight gain. When you don't have proper sleep, that impacts the hormones. So you want to have that proper sleep and learn the difference between hunger and dehydration, right? So drinking water first can go a long way in helping you manage that. So it goes without saying that you can definitely put on some weight during any holiday season or celebration. Just enjoy the food, but be mindful of your food. So some more ideas here is to have a plan of maintenance. Don't try to lose weight during the holidays, perhaps, right? Focusing on more reasonable in terms of becoming familiar with portion sizes, right? So I learned from a trainer that I worked with to use portion sizes. So using your hand. So if you don't have a scale, you could do that. So for example, any fat intake should be the size of your thumb. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think your protein should be the size of your palm here, and this much should be for the greens. And actually, this is your protein portion. This is your protein portion. This is your carbohydrate portion. This is for your vegetables, and this is for your fat. So you can learn to do that this way, and that way when you go out, you can monitor exactly how much food you should be eating according to you. So next is becoming familiar with the pre-snack, right? So pre-snacking before meals and social gatherings, this can avoid the overeating part. Healthy snacking, of course, right? Could be anything from smoothies, fruits and vegetables, that kind of thing. I'm not talking about cupcakes and cakes here, right? So don't drink your calories. Drink water, flat, flavored, seltzer, or sparkling. That can go a long way as well. A lot of empty calories in drinks can go in terms of adding more that we don't need. And taking time to chew your food. Savor the flavor and the texture. This is what mindful eating is all about. And sometimes I know we're in a rush. You just got to inhale it in and go. And when you do that, sure, that can help, in terms of saving time, but try not to get into that habit of doing that all the time. That mindful eating can go a long way, right? And do away with the endless nibbling and grazing. I find a lot of people tell me when they've lost weight is because they've stopped unnecessary snacking. It's just focusing on, let's say, 5 or 6 small meals throughout the day. So it's a little bit challenging when, let's say, you're invited to family and friends during this time. So tempting when you've got all this lavish food in front of you, but just monitor, be mindful. All right, let's get into the fun part when it dealing with family, right? So holiday time is probably one of the most stressful times when it comes to family gatherings, and dealing with family can bring out a lot of stress and frustration. However, you can still remain calm and collected by practicing personal emotional management. Yes, that's a thing. I also find that a lot of students who go back home, let's say, and are dealing with family issues, or they're away from home because they're avoiding these challenges, this time can cause a lot of worry heading back home. So here's some strategies we can look at to help you deal with that a little bit better. So being aware of your own triggers, right? And how to manage those emotions and regulate those emotions. Those are really helpful. Realizing that you can only change you and nobody else. People always complain, oh, I wish they could stop doing this. I wish they could change this. I wish they can do that. So this can be really important when you focus on looking at what are the things that I can work on for myself, right? And determined to stay calm and peaceful. So you can put it in your mind, right? Putting it ahead of time and manifesting that out, right? I will remain calm. I will remain peaceful. Remembering that emotions, they can be contagious, especially the intense ones. So when you are dealing with bad moods, that can also be potentially uh, infecting or other people, right? So what you want to do is work on your own moods. If you're finding yourself to be low, angry, or frustrated, work that out. Also, remember that nobody is perfect, right? Don't try to pretend that you are for the sake of what others may think of you. You are allowed to feel. You are allowed to feel low, upset, angry, whatever it is, right? However, it's not okay to project that onto others, right? We want to learn how to cope and deal with it in a healthy way. And so it brings us to this idea of choosing to do what is healthy for you always. So if family time is not healthy, then we want to have the strength to do something else and perhaps break tradition this year, or let the family know you're not coming, or setting boundaries, right? Or maybe going for a short amount of time. Because I know there are expectations of family being together during this time, right? And it's also important to understand that the holiday season in itself is a stressful time, right? We want to be able to recognize what or who triggers you and what causes high emotion. Being aware of family dynamics that lead to conflict can also be a form of preventative measures, right? Focusing on maintaining your emotional health by staying joyful and peaceful. And again, manifesting, I will stay calm, I will stay peaceful. And don't try to police others in how you think they should behave. Again, focus on you and what's important for you. Remember what's important and not take yourself too seriously, right? Having a sense of humor can go a long way as well when things get really frustrating. And approaching each other with self love, right? And out of that love for others. So when you do that, that can be really powerful in terms of approaching people with that love in your heart and compassion, and perhaps even looking at what are they going through, right? Putting yourself in their shoes. And also reflecting that back to you. I find that sometimes a lot of givers, right, give that attention to others and deplete themselves and not give that to themselves. So it's important to have a healthy balance with that. So I hope this talk about family it was helpful. And now let's move on to money and funds, right? So there's a reason for this season, and it's not to see how fast you can go broke, right? So we want to decide on the amount that you are able to spend without going into debt and learning how to stick with it. So don't get trapped by the holiday spending fever. And it's become so much easier because we have access to online shopping so much more now than we did before, right? So perhaps you can put together a spending plan that includes your gift list, entertainment, and travel, or whatever it is that you're planning for during the holiday break. And do away with our reputation, right? And embrace realism when spending. Um, can identify your motives for spending. So looking at, why am I spending, or for what reason, and what am I spending it for? Am I doing it just for the sake of it's holiday season gift time, or because I truly care about this person, or finding something meaningful, right? And get control of any emotions that prompt you to overspend to feel better. Shopping therapy, in other words, right? This is quite tempting. And stick to the plan and exercise control over that plan and reward yourself. Perhaps not by shopping, but rewarding yourself as well in different ways. Now, let's see how we can stay on track. All right. So make a contract with yourself to stick to your holiday spending plan. Have a talk with friends and family to let them know what your plans for gifts and spending for the holidays are going to be. So, for example, letting them know, hey, I'm going to be making hand made gifts. I'm not going to be buying gifts. So, personal gifts like that can go a long way as well. Now, after that, we can take a look at evaluating what is helpful and what is just routine, tradition, right? So perhaps looking at things that we not necessarily have to do just because it is the holidays, right? But looking at things of what we can do instead, especially I think the last few years, people have really had to adjust whatever holiday season, whether it's cultural or religious, and whatever time of year, we've really had to adjust certain things, right? So this is something to consider as we head into that time of year again. Perhaps having an accountability partner to keep you on track and to your integrity of the contract that you have to yourself, right? So that can go a long way in helping you as well. Now let's jump into looking at fun during this time. Although we said it can be one of the most highest times of year where we see depression, sadness, anger, and frustration, but it doesn't have to be necessarily when we have the proper preparation and change the way that we're thinking. So let's take a look here. So they can be joyful, and you can definitely have fun, because nothing has meaning until you give it meaning. So think reasonable thoughts. Perhaps we can go a little bit further, more positive thoughts, great thoughts, and then expect great things. So propagating goodness and finding it, and that's manifesting it out there. Giving thanks, meaning, gratefulness, right? Gratitude. That can have a long impact, a deep impact rather, and it can go a long way. When you are propagating that goodness and that positivity, you will find it, right? So this is the season of the time to find good in yourself, right? And others, and not necessarily the bad. So it's a good time to work on releasing guilt, shame, or fear that's holding you back, right? Live in the awareness that you are here now, being in the presence, right? And make the best of in this moment rather than looking at the past and looking at the future. Living in the moment. Eckhart Tolle, if you look at his book, I forget the title of it right now. There's one called A New World, and he talks a lot about living in the present moment and not worrying ahead and living in the past, but really mindfully living in the moment. And this is a really beautiful way of also enjoying and holding a memory when you are really holding it. I know when I go on special trips or spiritual trips and during the holidays, whether it's events with family, I find really being in that moment, looking at the sound, the scent, or really connecting positive things with those beautiful moments can stay with you, right? So you can look back on it later, but in the moment, enjoying it and also letting it go, right? So taking the time out just to breathe, right? Nothing is as important as recognizing the gift of life that we have. And if you are alone, do new things, experiment, right? Having fun, meeting new people, getting out there. Absolutely, this is an opportunity to broaden your horizons. So, how can we have this fun during the holidays, right? Well, break with traditions that no longer serve as happy times or events, right? Become the person you would love to be around. That's a really powerful one. Be the person that you want to spend time with, right? Determine that you will have a wonderful time. This is again manifesting out there, right? And then hopefully you will, God willing. Do something for others that you would like done for you, right? That's a really nice thing to do. Finding things to laugh and smile about daily. I'll tell you a little story. So today, I woke up sounding a lot more like this, and I've had these symptoms for a few days now. And so far, so good. I didn't think it was anything serious. But of course, I need to get to work. I've been working from home. And I was told I need to go get a COVID test. And this would put me in a panic because I'm actually leaving town for the weekend to do mental health events out of Ottawa. And of course, if you come back with a positive COVID test, what's that going to do? So I was using humor, but also reasonably putting my mind out there, saying, why am I going to worry ahead about this? The worst case scenario, I have to postpone. That's it, really, right? And stay home and then deal with it. Now, having had COVID before, that also put me in a little bit of a panic in terms of, oh, I don't want to go through that again. And oh, I'm going to let some people down, et cetera, et cetera. However, let's be reasonable and realistic here. Let's go step by step. Let's go first to the doctor to test it out because I felt that I had a sinus infection. By the way, it was. So I got antibiotics. My doctor said, still go and get tested just to be safe because you are planning on traveling. So I quickly contacted my local pharmacist, and actually, I spoke with the COVID testing center first, and they said a PCR test, or just rather a COVID test, is going to take 24 hours to get results back. I don't have time for that. So they recommend to get an antigen test, which I did. And the local pharmacist that I go to was able to do it immediately. And within 5-10 minutes, we found the results and it was negative. So that step by step, holding back and saying, okay, I'm not going to panic because when I get stressed, I'm going to feel worse. And I actually felt that begin. I said, no, we're not going there. I'm going to decide right now that I'm not going to let it go this way. I'm going to let it go this way. Just take it step by step. Go to the pharmacy, get the test done. If it's positive, then you have to go get an actual test done. And so be it. You have to postpone. You have to deal with that. It's not the end of the world, but deal with it. So when you also look at the worst case scenario of a situation, it can also help you lower the stress. This is where acceptance comes in. I must say having that positive attitude was very helpful. I must have done something good or positive because the results came out negative and I didn't have to change anything. And I got medication to deal with it. So we're all good now, although I sound like this. So wish me luck in terms of doing my other presentations later on. So I was also laughing at myself. I'm like, of all the things, heading out this weekend, this has to happen now, but that's okay. I'll deal with it, manage it, and still manage to do work as well. And here I am still doing the presentation. So we have to smile about these issues when challenges come your way because we need to find reasonable results to work through challenges rather than freak out, so to speak, right? Because that's just going to increase the stress hormones in our bodies and make things quite worse. All right. So back here to the actual list here is looking at calling loved ones that accept you as you are, right? Tell them how they make you feel good and how you feel about them as well. That's something that's really nice to share with each other. Being okay with spending time alone as well, right? Release any negativity about it, right? Remember to give thanks often. That gratitude is so important. And journal about the good times that you have and reflect on it as often as you can, especially when it's positive, right? Those positive vibes that you feel for a positive memory can go a long way in helping you deal with challenges. Now let's take a look at something that we cannot ignore during any holiday as well is love and loneliness, right? So here it can bring up loneliness during this time. It could be frustrations, emptiness of the heart, right? But if we maintain our joy and work on our own happiness, because it's not reliant on other people, we're able to find new loves within ourselves, perhaps others, new adventures to fill our hearts as well. So don't be a member of the Lonely Hearts Club, okay? What you want to do is where your attention goes and your energy flows, think about good times and meeting great people to share time. And you'll get more of that. Again, the propagating of that goodness, right? Rehearsing, releasing painful thoughts. Let's repeat that one again. This is a powerful one. Rehearse releasing painful thoughts of your lost love, past, or painful relationships or friendships, right? Or anybody that's caused you pain, right? Replace them with thoughts of hope for the future, finding peace within yourself and letting things go, right? This is a truly powerful one, especially during the holidays when you're feeling lonely and working on that release, right? Don't let emotions make you behave improperly when it comes to intentions, right? Because then you're going to go back and regret that, especially connecting with people that perhaps are toxic or unhealthy for you, right? And don't settle for a piece of something or someone just out of desperation, right? You want to have meaningful friendships and relationships and give loving kindness to those who are blessed to have you in your life, who are worthy of your presence in your life. So these are definite things to be aware of during the holidays, especially when it is a time where perhaps it is tempting to do things a little bit outside of your routine, but just be aware of how it could potentially be harmful, right? And the impact of that for you. So a little bit further now, when we take a look at love during this time, right? And this is really beautiful manifestations of becoming what you want to attract, right? Regaining your self confidence and your self esteem. No one will think you are great or beautiful or handsome until you believe it or yourself, right? And intend to be happy and emotionally healthy and work at it. Now, I did do a series recently on self esteem, if you recall, a few weeks ago, and it is on the Carlton Wellness page as well. And you absolutely have access to that, and you can watch that if you're looking at how to build your self esteem, how to connect within yourself to build that again, right? And so you can check out the 3-part series that we did, that it is on our Carlton Wellness page. So if you exude that confidence and love out there, you will also attract that as well, right? Now, being fully present, right? And here each day with each person that you interact with can go a long way as well, right? This is again living in the moment, like we were saying earlier with Eckhart Tolle. And stop beating yourself up over things about the past, right? They're done, they're gone, right? It's in the past. We want to be in the present. Find new things to work with, to be content with, to accept and be happy about, and let go of that past. Don't try to go to the future jumping hopscotch, right? Don't jump back to the past. Be grateful and live fully in the present with that joy in your heart. And smile and acknowledge the presence of everyone you come in contact with. Finally, if anybody has any questions or comments or any reflections, I'd love to hear any of that. And you can contact me if you are a Carleton student, if you'd like to speak with myself or any other counselor, you're welcome to do so. You can just call the office and book. And if you're interested in anything, those of you who are outside of Carleton, you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me through my email. I'll do my best to refer you to resources off campus as well. So we come to the end of our presentation and the end of our series on stress management for the holidays and for exams, and some beautiful reminders here on how to take care of ourselves, whether it's from looking at strategies for managing stress for exams and preparing ahead of time for exams, or just preparing heading home or going away, whether it's spending money, right? Whether it's the food or just our connections with our family and friends, just being aware of all of that in terms of how it can impact you, how to connect if you are physically alone, how to connect with other people, and not beating yourself up about the past, just focusing on what we want to take away from today's workshop is living and focusing in the present, right? Finding that joy and that joy of living in the present, being grateful and mindful of all the beautiful things that you do have in your life. This is what gratefulness, or rather gratitude, is all about. Thank you very much for those of you who've joined in on our session today. Those of you who didn't catch it or are just joining now, it will be available on the Carlton Wellness page, as well as on the Muslim Counselor YouTube page for those of you who don't have Facebook. Again, if you have any questions, you got my contact information. Carleton students, don't hesitate to come and use our services over the next while as we head into exams starting on December 11. And the health and counseling services will be open during this time all the way up until, I believe, December 23rd is the last is the last day for the holidays, and we open up again on January the 5th, 2022. So I guess I'm going to have to say it. I'll see you next year for our next round of workshops, and blessed holidays and Happy New Year. Take care. Bye.